Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Inner Changemaker. And I have a superstar guest with us today. This man was recognized across the globe as a premier motivational speaker and leader in the self-help and coaching industry. He's developed a number of transformational coaching programs, which I'm sure we're going to, dive into, where he really focuses on helping visionary leaders. And he has a couple different programs, the Ultimate Lifestyle Intensive. He also has his crazy high-end coaching program called Legacy. And I'm going to share with you a mini story when we first met. But Shannon Graham, welcome to the show, brother.
Awesome. Wong, my man. Good to be here.
Yeah. So Shannon, when I met you, we met at a few months back or last year at a conference called Thrive. And the reason, I think I told you this when we first met, I don't know if you remember, but when I saw you, I was like, oh my God, you're Shannon Graham. And you're like, yes. Must happen to you a lot. I don't know. But people were telling me that I needed to meet you because you are someone who does high-end retreats, you do high-end coaching. And to be honest, I was like, oh, it would be really interesting to kind of pick his brain on what his funnel looks like, what his, high-end funnel, or, that's really interesting, right? Like, who doesn't like the word high-end before anything?
Yeah.
And then I remember you telling me that you don't, even care about an email list, or you don't even have one really. And then that was a shocker. And then we did your session where you're telling us about the first concept you shared with me was people that have a gift, right? Versus people that they are a gift. They have a gift versus they're the gift. So here's the easy question, the first question, because I know we're going to go deep from here.
Okay.
How does one know if they are one or the other? Like, how do I know if I have a gift or if I am the gift?
Sure. It essentially comes down to how do you, if you're someone who wants to help the world, then the question is, how do you prefer to do that? So do you do it through, do you like to make things? Do you like to create things, whether it's technology or music or art or something? Do you literally create something and that thing helps the world? Or do you just show up, and whether it's at parties or events or whatever, the world gets transformed just by you being there? That's really the biggest determining factor.
So do you think that, just to add on to it, do you think that we intuitively know kind of where we stand, like as people are listening to this go, oh, maybe I have an e-commerce store, I have a SaaS company, like we make a product, but then, do they know like they have that own kind of, it falls into almost like what people would probably describe as your personal brand, or how you really make others feel? Like, do you think people intuitively know kind of where they sit on this?
Well, I think so. I certainly think that people who are a gift know that they have some ability to help people. And people who are a gift obviously don't all have the same gift, but I think that they all have this kind of gut feeling that like, hey, you know what? Like people, I hear this a lot. People who are the gift very often will say to me, people have a very easy time opening up to me, or people have a very easy time trusting me, or, something like that.
Yeah.
That's a very clear sign. So if you just feel like you have these abilities where you can listen really well to people, or you can kind of intuitively do your magic with people, that's a pretty clear indicator. For people who are a gift. People who have a gift, it's kind of like if like throughout your life, throughout your childhood, you were always tinkering and creating things, that's usually a good sign.
Nice.
That you have a gift.
Well, and I love that you make this distinction right off the bat. And the reason I'm opening with this is because, there's so much of what, the videos that I've seen that you've created, and the content that you create, and the people that you've been able to help. Everything kind of comes back to understanding where do you kind of sit on this and how to leverage what you have into the world. So let's go back really quick before we go forward. And I don't actually, I didn't want to dive too deep into your history of things, but I'm pretty sure I heard somewhere, it might've been one of your videos or someone interviewing you in the past, that you had this misconception about you. People, when they look at your brand and, we can get into the high end, coaching packages and all that kind of stuff. When they first kind of come upon you, they really think that you grew up wealthy.
Yeah.
You grew up rich. And I think I do remember it now, because you're saying that, people have this misconception when they see you, they go, oh, it's this rich kid or however. And then you mentioned that you were living on an old school bus.
Yeah.
At some point. So tell us about that. Like, how did you tell us that story? And then how did, maybe not in massive detail, but in broad strokes, how did that kind of go into the evolution of the Shannon Graham today?
Sure. Well, my mom and dad split up when I was fairly young, and my mom, she had to work a lot. And we moved from Florida to Vermont. And when we first moved there, we were kind of in between housing for a little while. And this friend of ours happened to have this old school bus that had been kind of renovated. And we lived on that bus for a year. And the cool thing about it is when you're young, you don't really know. Like, we just thought it was cool. We were
like an adventure.
We live on a school bus. And looking back, it's like, it was still cool. But yeah, I think it's funny because being where I am now, I certainly believe that the past that I had, lived in a bus for a while. I was actually homeless for a while. Allows me to wake up every day and to soak it in and never take anything for granted. Never take any of the success or anything I've created for granted. Because I know what it's like to be on the other side of it.
I mean, you mentioned, living on a school bus, being homeless. I mean, like, do you remember, like, how did that feel? I mean, I guess as a kid, you don't really, but looking back, like, how did all those things feel as if when you were there?
Yeah, well, the bus, I was pretty young on the bus.
Right.
But the homeless thing, I was maybe like 22, 21, 22, in New York City.
Okay.
So that was rough. I remember, I'll never forget, clear as day. I had this one apartment that was going to work out for me, and then it fell through. And it was just kind of like one thing after another, as far as like friends that had couches that I couldn't sleep on because they either had relatives in town or like, it was just like, there was no option. And I remember feeling this cold wash come over me and thinking to myself, wow, this is it. Like I have zero options right now. And there's kind of certainly a sadness, kind of feels kind of helpless feeling. But the funny thing was, in all honesty, there was some sadness and there was some kind of like feelings of helplessness. But me being me, there was also this feeling of kind of like, oh, this is a game. Now I'm like Jason Bourne, like I have to survive kind of thing. So it was kind of, for the first couple of days, it was actually kind of fun. And then it became not very fun very fast.
Was it during the winter months or?
No, I feel like it was in the like late summer.
Wow.
So it wasn't bad. It wasn't like the conditions were horrible or anything. But yeah, I remember that, having that combination of not being happy about it, but then also trying to see the good in it and feeling the adventure in it. And then eventually just coming to the point where I said, okay, enough is enough. It's time to move on. And that was a huge stepping stone. That was a huge milestone in my thinking. Because I think sometimes when you grow up without a lot of money, some people can develop this kind of victim mentality, you know, like things happen to them.
Yeah.
And I certainly sensed some of that while I was in New York. And I came to the conclusion that, okay, if I'm going to get out of this situation, then I am going to be the one to get myself out of it.
Yeah.
And that was a very empowering thought, because it was like, hey, essentially I had to take ownership. That was kind of the tough part. I had to take responsibility for being where I was. I said, hey, listen, this didn't happen to me. I created it. This wasn't an accident. I didn't fall here. I created this. And the good news about that is that I can create something different. And that led to a whole new chapter in my life, where I kind of took the driver's seat and consciously started creating a lot of change.
I know we have some mutual friends, Preston and Alexi. They came out of a book a little while ago, the 5 awesome steps of living like now or never, right? 5 awesome steps. One of them was they were on the show, so I read their book and I knew this, but one of them was radical responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. And for a lot of people that are going through maybe a tough time in their business and their relationships, it's a really tough pill to swallow.
Oh yeah.
Right. To say like, hey, I called this in my life.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine, I mean, how tough it would have been to like be wherever you were sitting.
Totally.
In a cafe or in the corner somewhere. And
Yeah.
just like, I called this homelessness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Around me. I called this scarcity around me.
Yeah. I created this. Yeah, it is a tough pill to swallow. But I feel like it is one of the most critical pills that you can swallow in life, because when you do, then you realize, oh, I am the source of my experience. And if I'm not happy with what I'm currently experiencing, that means I can change it. And that really makes such a huge difference. So
just to give some context around, you and your brand from there, like, how's your life now? Like, how's life with Shannon Graham now in Santa Barbara?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I have what most people would call a dream life. I mean, I live in pretty damn close to what I would call my dream house. I'm marrying the woman of my dreams in about 25 days or so.
Congrats on that, by the way.
Thank you. I'm healthier than I've ever been, and I'm more happy. I'm more fulfilled. I'm more content than I've ever been. Life for me is really excellent right now.
And then your coaching, I mean, we can dive into this, but I remember.
Yeah, no, that's part of what I mean as far as my fulfillment goes. Yeah. I'm more fulfilled in my work than ever before as a result of me, and we can dive into this, but as a result of me choosing to play a bigger game. So I feel really great.
I just remember when we had you were having your meetup and you were talking to us about your programs and what have you, and the numbers that you're throwing around. I remember my face was just like permanently like in awe. And I was like, did he just say like 100,000? Did he just say 150,000? Like it was nuts. Yeah. So what was like, do you remember like, what was the first, like you took responsibility. You're like, hey, I'm going to own what's happening around me. Yeah. Like, did you evolve into coaching or
So literally the vehicle that got me out of being homeless was coaching.
Wow.
I went to sleep one night and I said, one of my biggest mentors, I guess, is Tony Robbins. And one of my favorite things that he says is, it is in moments of decision that your destiny is shaped. And so I remember being in this alleyway and just being so sick and tired of being homeless. And it wasn't even that long. It's not like I was homeless for months, but like any amount of time of being homeless, like you're kind of done with.
Sure.
So I just remember reaching this tipping point and being like, okay, this is it. I'm putting my foot down. I'm done. how do I get myself out of this? And that's another thing. A great tool that I learned from Tony is that the quality of your life comes down to the quality of questions you ask yourself. So you just have to get really good at asking excellent questions and asking questions that can give you the answers that you want, the answers that are going to move you forward. And so I said, okay, how do I get myself out of this? And I said, well, I need money. And I said, okay, how do I make money? And I said, well, there's a lot of ways to make money. And it was funny because my brain went in kind of two directions. It was like the kind of like legal, ethical way, and then the like, not so much kind of way, because it is an option.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I want to stay on the good foot and keep my nose clean, as my dad likes to say. So I said, okay, great. Then essentially there's two options. I can go get a job. And if that's the case, it's going to take me a while to make some money because I got to find a job. I got to get hired. I got to work for at least a week or two. And then I get paid. Like,
right. There's a sequence of things. Yeah.
That's going to take way too long. So I said, I need something that's immediate, that's legal, that's ideally that's awesome. Yeah. And I was like, well, okay, what do I have? And I just kind of laid my tool belt out and was like, well, I've helped people with this. I've helped people with this. I know a little bit about this. And the big elephant in the room was that I, at that point, even the funny thing that I was homeless at the time, but developmentally, from a personal development standpoint, I was very evolved. And so I said to myself, the big elephant in the room was, you know what? I'm really good at helping other people make their lives better. And that wasn't just true for me. It wasn't because, yes, I had done it for myself. In high school, I had done it for my friends in high school and kids in high school because, you know, it's like a good movie. Once you see it, you just want to share it. It's like I started learning personal development when I was about 16. So I just was like, hey, man, you're struggling to be motivated. Here's this one little trick. Oh, you're struggling with your communication. Here's this one little thing. And I was just like the drug dealer of
personal development.
Yeah.
Handing out Think and Grow Rich.
But, you know, I have this scary talent for simplifying and crystallizing things. So rather than being like, hey, read this whole book or hey, do this whole course that I did, I could distill it down to like one thing that I would say and be like, hey, just do this, or hey, just think about this. And it would be like that shift that somebody would need to put them on a completely different course. And so I had experience not only changing my own life, but other people's lives. I just hadn't gotten paid for it. It just hadn't been a career for me. And so I said to myself, oh, I could like coach people. Now this was like coaching back then wasn't even a thing. It wasn't even like a real career. You know, like if you told people you were a coach, they either thought they were like, oh, like softball coach, like,
right.
You know, or they'd give you this look like, so you're unemployed.
Right. Yeah.
That's how new, I mean, coaching even still to this day, relatively is very new.
I was going to say, yeah.
Relatively, compared to like being a dentist. But yeah, certainly back then it was very new. But I knew that was the most valuable thing that I could bring to the world. And so I decided that was what I was going to do. And I put this ad together on Craigslist, and I actually got my first client the very next day. And that just changed everything for me. And it put me on a totally different course.
Man, that's incredible. There's so much there's so much that you've just given us to dive into. But I mean, one of the first things that comes to mind is, I'm pretty sure you wrote about this recently, was that there's a lot of coaches out there that are in the business of changing other people's lives, and yet they're broke.
Yeah.
Right. From a financial standpoint, right? Maybe they're awesome, and their work is awesome, but they somehow can't get to that level of getting in clients and getting their own people that they work with to pay them what they're worth. Yeah. And you see this, it's kind of like an epidemic, actually.
Kind of is.
Right? Like with all coaches, different, like, I'm not just talking life coaches, like every coach, right?
Oh yeah.
So where do you think that comes from, and why do you think this is happening with all these people? Because I think it's partially of all this, like people are like, they want to give.
Totally.
Right. So
Yep.
tell us a little bit of just your thoughts, because, you know, that's incredible that you started from there and now you're like a 7-8 figure coach.
Yeah. So now the conversation turns a little bit, because the inner game of coaching is really important. And I think there's a couple pieces to the puzzle that really make a big difference. The first by far is worthiness. The majority of people that I see that are undercharging or not getting paid what they're worth is because they don't know what they're worth, or they've determined that they're not worth that much. Tony says, we don't get what we want, we get what we expect. So if we have an inner monologue of, I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy, which is true for a lot of people. I know it was true for me for a long time. If that's the inner monologue, if that's the operating system, then you've determined that your value is not that much. So even if you have a lot of value to share with the world, you have this default where you can't receive a lot of value. That's why people love to give and give and give, because it keeps them out of the getting mode. And so that by far is one of the first pieces, is they doubt their value and their worthiness. And
let me ask you this without, you know, because I do want to hear maybe some of the other pieces of coaching. When you first started, how did that process look for you? Like, how did you kind of figure out your worth in that process?
Well, I essentially thought to myself, okay, how would I know? Like, well, okay, so to get really into it, I had to reverse engineer what worthiness was. Like what does that mean? What is worthiness? What makes someone worthy and unworthy?
Yeah.
Is there such a thing? And yes, of course, if you're going to charge people a lot of money, you have to have a lot of like actual value. You can't have this like just belief of like, oh, I am very valuable, and so therefore like pay me a lot of money. Although that's honestly a big piece of it. But of course, you have to have like literal value that you can produce for people. But the I am worth it piece comes first. Like that comes first, and then like, okay, what do I know, or what's my gift? What can I do? That's the actual value. Yeah. But I had to really distill down, what is worthiness? Is it something that you have, or it's something that you are? And I realized that it's something that you are. And if it's something that you are, then is it conditional? Does sometimes you have it and sometimes you don't? Well, of course not. Like, I think of like an ultimate parent-child relationship, like an ultimately unconditionally loving relationship. Like if the kid does something bad, are they now unworthy of love? No, definitely not. And so I realized that worthiness is unconditional, but we just pick up things along the line, unfortunately, sometimes from our parents, sometimes from ourselves, who knows where we get it. But we start off as like ultimately worthy. And then we pick up little ideas and pieces along the way that we go, oh, they didn't want to spend time with me today, so I must not be worthy. Or, oh, they said that I was bad, so I must not be worthy. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we start to form the beliefs. So I find that for me, I had to really distill down and get to the root of what is worthiness. And once I understood that it was something that's unconditional, that not only do I have inherently, but everybody has, then I said, oh, okay. Then that allowed me to open up and say, you know what? For me to get what I want is a good thing. And if I can get what I want by helping other people get what they want, then everybody wins. And that was that was like the switch that got flick that
Yeah.
changed everything, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so if you guys are watching this, or if you guys are listening to this, Changemakers, like, make sure to go to Facebook and actually follow Shannon Graham. And I'm sure he gets tons of like friend requests, but like so much of what he's sharing is amazing, and it's really impactful. But it definitely makes you think. Every time like we have an interaction, I was like, I almost need to take some time away and process. You know what I mean? I think people can find, information on you on shannongraham.com, but I just wanted to throw it out there. If you're getting great value out of this, like, let us know. And especially, make sure to follow Shannon on Facebook. So, I mean, that worthiness piece is so massive, because I always think, you're so spot on, because it's almost like you get what you expect. Right. And for me, it's always like an energy. Like if you're putting out a certain energy, like money is like a vibration, right? Like it's a certain frequency. So if you don't have that level of worthiness and you're not conveying that, you could be spewing out a lot of content, and it might be valuable. It might really help them get from A to B.
Yeah.
But you're not going to it's almost like you're not receiving on the other end.
Totally. Well, there's a little bit of a myth in what you just said.
Perfect.
So let's dispel that.
Okay.
The myth is that people think that if they give a ton of value, then people are going to receive a ton of value. But what I have found is that if you don't have the level of money that you desire,
okay,
then it's hard to truly give from a cup that's empty. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's amazing.
It's hard to give from a cup that's empty. And so imagine the difference between someone who financially is struggling and they want to give, and someone who's in overflow, someone that's in overflow, and what they can give. Not even financially, but just how they show up energetically, and the level of richness that they have to give is night and day. So I find the best thing that people can do that want to give is to receive first. To be a really good giver, you have to be a really good receiver.
I love it. I mean, I think that's it's so true. So people are willing, like they know they're giving a lot. They're giving a lot of like they're doing a lot in their business. They're giving. I don't even know if this is like a silly question, but like, how do they train themselves, or how do they start receiving? Like, how do they work out that muscle?
Sure. Well, so this leads us to another piece of the puzzle, which is, what do you want? What do you want? So many people can't successfully answer that question. Most people start with what they don't want, which is not a correct answer. What you don't want is not what you want. It's what you don't want. But what do you want? What do you want? What do you honestly want? Without judging it or without fear of what people are going to think, what do you want? Without having to figure out how you're going to get it or why you're going to get it or like what the logistics are, just what do you want? Just to get honest about that alone is huge, because if you've got worthiness challenges, then you're going to be like, you don't even indulge in thinking about what you want because you don't think that you should have it. So you have to start there. What do I want? When I get really honest, what do I want? Because I believe that your desires are expansion seeking to express itself. I'll say that again.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I believe that desire is expansion, your inner bigness seeking to express itself. So think about what happens when you deny your desires. What are you really denying? Your bigness, right?
You're desiring what you want. You're desiring
Yeah.
fulfillment.
Right. All of that fulfillment, all of that growth, all of that expansion that naturally wants to come out in you gets stifled. And that's called suffering. Suffering is unnecessary pain. Suffering is unnecessary pain. And so when you deny yourself what you want, you suffer. That's why people that aren't making the kind of money that they want, they suffer to some degree. And so if you're giving, if you want to give a lot of value, but ultimately, energetically, it's coming from a place of suffering, it doesn't work.
There's that contradiction there.
There's a contradiction. It's actually out of integrity. It's not honest. Because you're turning those who receive from you into thieves, because they're taking something from you that you honestly want for yourself. You want someone to be pouring into you, but you don't allow that to happen. So you think the next best thing is to give, which is incorrect.
I mean, so much of what you're saying, I feel like, and a constant theme that comes up on this show specifically, and for people that are watching, listening, they'll know exactly where I'm going, which is the kind of the battle between scarcity mindset and trying to, and versus abundance, right? And I used to ask a lot of questions like, oh, how do I get into abundance? How do I what are the 3-step process, like, do I sit down, do I meditate, and then I'm in one, like whatever it is. And so much of this is understanding just like what you're talking about right here. Because if you're denying yourself, okay, we're back.
We're back.
But okay, so I was just saying, like, what you were talking about has so much to do with that conversation of, it's almost like the state, like the emotional states of scarcity and abundance.
Yeah.
And this comes up all the time when people are talking about, oh, I need to take quote unquote time off. But Gary Vee or someone else told me that I need to be hustling 4 hours a day, but I deny myself the hike that I enjoy.
Yeah.
I deny myself the, whatever, going to that art gallery or taking myself out because I haven't achieved success yet.
Sure. The challenge with that is that habits have a very excellent way of perpetuating themselves. So let's think about it scientifically. If you have a habit of denying yourself what you want, not for a little amount of time, but for a long time, so that it becomes this ingrained automatic habit, then when you do get to whatever hypothetical destination you've set for yourself to give yourself permission to then do something, what does your history tell you to do? What does the habit tell you to do at that point? The opposite. So it doesn't work. That's why so many people are like, oh, when I make $1 million, I'll be happy. It's like, no. Because you've created a condition, you've created a rule that I'll be unhappy until then. And there's so much more time that when you finally get there, your brain is like, well, even though this is the moment, like this is the pattern. And I stick with the pattern. That's how the brain works. The brain is like, hey, I stick with what's familiar. So it just doesn't work. So that takes us back to the question of, what do you want? What do you want? And how do you give yourself what you want now? Because to deny yourself that those things creates a cycle of denying your desires, which ultimately stifles your expansion. And that's not good for anybody.
Nope. It's not good for people you work with. It's not good for you. It's not good for anybody that's around you.
Nope.
And so you've mentioned a couple pieces, right? I mean, what do you want being one of the bigger ones?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the conversation of worthiness, we could just do a whole episode really on that topic alone.
Yeah.
What are maybe some of the other crucial puzzle pieces that you feel that we maybe haven't touched on?
I think when it comes to what do you want from a business standpoint, you have to, like, if you're in the coaching world or if you're in the world of helping other people, then you have to ask yourself, what do you want? How much money do you want to make compared to maybe how much are you making? How do you want to help people compared to maybe how are you currently helping people? So for example, I had certain programs and products and things like that I just kind of saw other people and that's how they did it and they were successful. So I said, oh, if I want to be successful, I should do what they do.
Right.
But I was like, man, I don't really like doing it this way. It's kind of like wanting to be a dancer and seeing someone who's really good at tango and being like, oh, well, they're a really good dancer, then I guess I should do tango. And you do it, but maybe for you and your personality, it's like, it's too serious, it's too like,
Sure.
And maybe you like hip hop or something, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's why the question of what do you want is so important. Like, I want to be a great dancer. Great. That's good. But take that to another level. Like, I want to be a successful coach. Great. But what does that mean? Like, what does that look like financially? And what does that look like within your business model? Your business model should be a reflection of your own self-expression. It shouldn't be a copy and paste version of somebody else's. And so I find that if you're in the world of helping other people, the best thing that you can do for the people that you help is to do things your way. Because then they get the most genuine version of you, which is probably the most powerful and probably the most valuable.
I mean, it's actually really incredible. I remember when you were talking about this live, right? You were asking the question, how do you create? You really can't scale relationships or relationship building. You have to really. It's one of those things that you can't just put an automation sequence behind creating relationships and you're going to expect to have the same quality of relationships. And that's something that's always stuck with me as someone who, builds their business online. I don't really consider myself a great internet marketer by any means, but
sure.
Nonetheless, if you do any business online, you are by default, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A little bit of it, right?
Totally.
But I have a question here for you because I saw you write something and I always thought it was really curious how you wrote this. This is a direct quote from your personal Facebook.
Okay.
So for people that are listening to this, go follow this man, go follow his lives. So you said, for the record, I don't help people create results I have personally achieved.
Yeah.
I help them create results that no one has achieved.
Right.
And you will find if you are in the service industry that your gift is infinitely more valuable than your knowledge and experience.
Yep.
And so there's a lot there, but here's the question. How the heck does anybody, or do you help people create results that no one has achieved?
Sure. Well, it goes back to what I said about you must ask excellent questions. So if you want to help someone do something that's never been done, you have to start with a question that's never been answered. So that means I get to partner with people who are so visionary that they have questions that do not yet have answers. I'll give you an example. One of the guys that I work with is from New Zealand, and his impossible question was, how do we raise the GDP of New Zealand by raising the GDC, which is the gross domestic confidence?
Okay.
How do we raise the GDP of an entire country by raising the confidence of the people who live in that country? Pretty cool question.
Yeah.
And at that time, it didn't have an answer. So that's an impossible question, which leads to having to use your creativity and your imagination to figure out the answer. And once you figure out the answer, then you execute on it. And once you execute on it, essentially, you've done the impossible.
I know I know a little bit about the story. Just for people that are listening or watching this, how has that evolution worked in that particular example for you and that client?
So that story in particular is pretty awesome. So in New Zealand and Australia, they have this funky thing called tall poppy syndrome, which is essentially a mindset that is like, who are you to have a big idea? Who are you to think that you can change the world? And the challenge is that New Zealand per capita has some of the most innovative geniuses in the world. So can you imagine, you're an innovative genius, you create this amazing world-changing technology, but then you have this mindset that goes, yeah, but I should just like, you know, keep it quiet and like, don't really talk about it. And like, who am I to change the world, you know? So I'll just like, nah. And not only do you do this to yourself, but the people around you are like, oh, JayWong, you invented this like machine that can bring fresh water to other people that need it in other countries. But like, you know, who are you to like have a big idea? You should just like, you know, take it easy.
Yeah.
So that sucks, right? That's like really bad.
Yeah.
And so this guy that I'm working with said, man, we could revolutionize not only this country, but the world if all we did was help people tweak this mindset.
Mm.
And so how do you raise the GDP? By raising the GDC essentially encapsulates that challenge. And we came to the conclusion that the best way to shift consciousness is to show them that something is possible that they once believed was impossible. This is based off of the Roger Bannister effect that happened when he ran the 4-minute mile. Everyone believed it was impossible to run a 4-minute mile. Some scientists thought that your body would literally like explode if you like internally, you just couldn't handle running that fast and you'd just die.
Mm.
And Roger Bannister was like, no, I think it's possible. And that's all it took, was just that little shift. And sure enough, he ran a 4-minute mile. But what was cool, in my opinion, the coolest thing about it was that year, I think 6 other people broke the 4-minute mile purely because they believed that something that they once thought was impossible was now possible. That's all. It was just that one shift. It was like, oh, wait, that guy did it? Oh, start the clock. And then boom, they just took off and did it.
Yeah.
So it's amazing what happens when you believe that you can. And so there's this one guy in New Zealand who's an inventor. His name's Ollie McCosher. He invented what's called a rapid public transportation system. It is a zero-emission rail system with these little pods that run above the traffic line at high speed. It can turn an entire city carbon neutral in about 5 years. And he got an audience from the Prime Minister of India to pitch his transportation idea to the Prime Minister of Transportation in India. Mm. India just invested something like $8 trillion with a T dollars over the next, I think, 15 or 20 years to develop smart cities. Mm. So India is currently on the lookout for smart technology, smart transportation, smart energy, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it was like the perfect puzzle pieces. This guy from New Zealand flew to India, and because he worked with this guy, Daniel Batten, that I'm working with, Daniel helped him shift that mindset. That was one of the biggest things he helped him do, is just to own his own value. So there's that theme again, to own his own worthiness of like, yes, I created something that's world changing, own it. And I can receive the abundance that comes from me sharing this with the world. Yes. And then he helped him just with a little bit of strategy for like what to say and how to say it when you're pitching, right? Because that matters.
Yeah.
And he shows up in India and he nails the ball out of the park. They rewrote the transportation policy to include his technology.
It's incredible.
And they just green lighted, I think, an 1,000, 1,500, so I don't remember the exact number, but about 1,000 kilometer test track to green light the next phase of the operation. So it's awesome. So literally, tangibly, we've changed the world just by being willing to ask impossible questions and having the guts to answer them and stick with them until we figure it out.
Shannon, I mean, that's an incredible story. And, you know, as you were talking, I was thinking, you know, I think I know the perfect title for this. It's, you know, from homelessness to tackling the impossible, or to addressing the impossible, or asking impossible questions.
Yeah.
And I think that's so amazing. And what phenomenal work. I mean, how does that make you feel though? Like when you know, like you are someone, like you're a catalyst for someone else to go attempt the impossible.
Yeah. Well,
How does that feel?
yeah, it feels really great because it feels really great for two reasons. Number one, because it's the version of myself that I always wanted to be.
Mm.
You know, deep down, I always wanted to rely on my imagination and my creativity to bring the majority of the value that I have to the table. I wanted to be known as the guy that gets paid because of his imagination and his creativity, not his knowledge and his experience. But that took me really trusting myself and owning my own value to be able to stand in that, not just step into it, but stand in it and put a permanent residence there. And so that feels really good just to myself.
Yeah.
And then to know that I am the corner man for some of these amazing world-changing people just feels awesome as well.
That must be unreal. I know we mentioned it a couple times. Is there another place? Well, I have a couple last questions here for you. But before we wrap up, is there another place that people could kind of follow you on your journey? I'm trying to develop a community where people are just not scared of reaching out and wanting to let you know that if you've gotten any value out of this, you need to reach out to Shannon and let him know.
Yeah, totally. Right now the platform that I like the most is Facebook. I'm not a big Snapchatter. I'm not a tweeter. I'm not an Instagrammer. I'm not a whatever other thing that there is.
Sure.
I'm just a Facebook guy. Facebook is a really great way for me to share my story and my ideas and things. And it's a really excellent way for me to engage with people on a very personal level. So throughout the day, my social media life pretty much looks like me posting things and then also engaging with people in messages. So if you like what I've talked about here today, or you've gotten value out of it and want to ask me any questions or things like that, just find me on Facebook and send me a message.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Shannon, just wrapping up, I mean, it's been phenomenal for you to share some of these concepts. I love the empty cup to overflow. And I think that illustrates the perfect, picture in people's minds.
Yeah.
The theme of the show is people that are choosing legacy over currency. And I know you have a coaching program called Legacy. That's partially why, I just wanted to, it's just amazing to have you on. For the work that you're doing now, how do you view the legacy that you're creating? What's your perspective in terms?
Well, a large part of what I feel like the legacy that I'm creating is a world where extraordinary is ordinary. Right now, it's the opposite. Right now, people like Elon, or people like myself, or people that are doing really big things, they're looked at in society as like, wow, that's so rare. That's so like that. There's so few people that are like that. But what if that was common? What if like most people were like Elon? What if that was just common?
Yeah.
Like and it doesn't even necessarily have to be to Elon level, but what if most people were willing to step into their expansiveness as much as someone like myself or like Elon? What would that mean for the world? And I feel like the more I can encourage people that I work with to figure out what's impossible and then do it, the more examples I'll create of people in different segments or sections of the world going, oh, I thought that was impossible, but I feel like I can do it now. So then they do it. And maybe that's in like self-expression. And then maybe over here in technology, same thing. And then maybe over here in this other sector, same thing. So you're creating this effect in multiple places. Maybe it's in your home life, in your family life, right? So like, hey, for me to be more of a vulnerable dad, that just feels impossible for me. But then there's this example that you can look at that hopefully I had a hand in creating, where a dad can go, wow, if that guy who was like not vulnerable at all with his family now totally is, then maybe I can be too. So in family, in health, in tech, in this and that. So you have all these people being willing to push their edges and figure out how to do their own impossible, that in a large nutshell is my legacy.
And I think to your point of the 4-minute mile, right? I mean, I remember being in high school, like a decade plus ago, and people were running under 4 minutes when you're at like the state championship level, or even at the national level. I think it's just crazy what sometimes that people are running now. Yeah. And so that belief of possibility, of chasing possibility, of like, I think I can do it because I saw someone do it, or I just have that belief there. It's absolutely life-changing.
Totally. So that's kind of my point, is like, there's phases, there's iterations, you know. It's like when computers first came out, they were like $1 million each. Yeah. And no one could afford them. And like only the elite had computers, and they didn't even know what to do with them. Now it's like freaking everybody has computers. And sooner than later, computers are going to phase out. There's not even going to be such thing as a computer anymore. It'll be like a chip in your head, or it'll be like something that you somehow, like thinking wise, get connected to. I don't know what it's going to be, but it'll go away. I can guarantee you.
So let me ask you this. I wasn't expecting.
So my point is that at first you do something that's impossible and the world goes, wow, but then enough people catch on, and then it just becomes common. Just like you said, the 4-minute mile now in high school is just like a regular thing. So my goal is to do a bunch of impossible stuff now to have the world go, wow, but then have that kind of like taper off, and then have it just be common.
I mean, I think you make very, very good distinctions. And it's amazing that you get to have a chance to work with those people that are tackling the impossible. But something that you made me think about as you were just talking about right there, and it's not something I was going to ask, but it's one thing to talk about the future of technology, and there's a lot of people that do that. But maybe I would love to hear your opinion on this, because I think you're in a position where maybe you're helping so many leaders. What do you think is the future of leadership? Sure.
This is something that I think a lot about, the future of leadership. I think the future of leadership has a couple pieces to it. The first piece goes back to what we were talking about, is this idea of being a leader and giving from a place of overflow. Yeah. I think that the best leaders, certainly the best leaders that I have modeled or that I have looked at and been inspired by, were leaders that led from a place of overflow. And I find that the genesis of a thing is what maintains the thing. And so if initially someone is in overflow, then that overflow gets transmuted onto the people. And that completely changes the vibe. It completely changes the atmosphere. It completely changes their experience. Like, have you ever lent someone money that you really didn't want to lend them the money, but you just did? Yeah. It sucks, right? Yeah. It's you turn the people who receive from you into thieves, because you really shouldn't be giving, but for whatever reason you do. Well, it's the same thing in leadership. If you're giving from a place of leadership and you have an empty cup, then energetically the people on the receiving side, you're turning into thieves. And so to come from a place of overflow completely changes everything. And not only overflow, but worthiness. So what you are, because I believe that the role of a leader has gotten diluted. Most people think that leadership is synonymous with having a followers. Yeah. But it's not. The real core definition of leadership is someone who creates other leaders. And so I believe, first of all, there has to be an owning of worthiness, and there has to be a filling up of yourself. But then the second piece is you must shift how you think about leadership. It's not just like, hey, can I get a bunch of people to follow me? It's, hey, can I be a catalyst for other people to be a leader? And either in relation to my big picture or their own, it doesn't really matter.
So if you guys are watching this and you're listening to this, I mean, if this topic piques your interest, I mean, be sure to follow Shannon on this topic, because I know he does talk a lot. And I think you're a perfect example. I just want to take a second and acknowledge you and for being an example of what a future leader would look, or being a present leader and painting that picture for us future leaders. So I just want to acknowledge you for that. Last question here on the show.
All right.
What comes to mind, or what do you think about when you hear the word changemaker?
I think about the opportunity that exists right now for people like myself, people like you, I feel like we are on the cusp of a completely new era. And the era is this era of pushing the limits of what's possible for ourselves. I think that there's this whole group of people that want to push the limits of technology and see how far that can go, which I think is great. But my fear is that if technology expands faster than people do, then we'll kind of end up as one of those societies that like is not very transcended personally and just kind of engages with really awesome technology. The challenge with that is that even really excellent future technology is only as good or as useful as the user. You know what I mean? Like the internet and a computer, a laptop with a connection to the internet has the potential to do just about anything that you can think of. And what do most people do with it? Watch cat videos, like look at memes. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
But what if the user was transcended? They could make that computer do something really awesome. I remember one of my best friends saw one of the very, very first computers ever. And he said, "What is that?" And his grandfather said, "It's a computer." And he says, "Well, what does it do?" And he said, "Anything you're smart enough to make it do." And so if we're just this kind of like society that doesn't evolve, then we're going to have this amazing technology and we'll just be able to somehow like watch even more cat videos in like 3D with like virtual reality cat videos, or is it going to be something better? And I tend to believe the other side. I believe there's another vein of people that are desperately interested in expanding consciousness and expanding the human experience, because human potential, like no one knows what the cap of human potential is, if it even exists. I don't even think we're close to understanding what human potential is. I mean, relatively, we're still a young race.
Yeah.
And so to think that we've kind of like maxed it out is silly. So when you say changemaker, it gets me excited because there's this whole era, and with technology is going to eliminate a lot of jobs very soon. Millions upon millions upon millions of people are going to lose their jobs overnight. And so all of those people are going to have to do something else. They won't have a choice. And some of them are going to want to do really excellent things in the world. Some of them are going to go, you know what? I can't get away with just having a job that I don't really love anymore. I can't get away with that. Maybe this is my sign to do what I really want to do. And they're going to need leaders. They're going to need people like yourself. They're going to need people like me to show them the way. So if you're a change maker now, I think that now is the best time to be one, because there's this whole wave that's coming that if you position yourself correctly, you will just be part of ushering in an age of like human awesomeness that we've never seen before.
That was beautiful. We got to make that into like a bit of an illustration.
Are we recording this?
I was like, please tell me I'm recording. Shannon, thank you so much, man. Thank you for spending the time with us. Thank you for reminding us to be in overflow and painting a brighter future in leadership for us to step into. So just thanks, man. I thought this was an amazing episode. And I'm sure people are going to be reaching out to you over Facebook, stalking all your Facebook lives.
Cool.
Coming in there. So hope you had fun, man. Yeah, exactly. But we'll definitely chat with you next time, Shannon. Thank you.
Yeah, sounds great, brother.